I'm Aniko Shohar. I'm going to chair this session. Please let me remind you that the talk should not exceed 20 minutes to leave 10 minutes for discussion. And I ask everyone to put their questions into the chat. Without any further ado, I would like to say that our first speaker is going to be Paola Ruffo, who is going to speak about including literary translators' self-imaging strategies in the quest of sustainable technological development. And please check the PETRA-E application for further details about Paola. And Paola, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see it. Okay. So yeah, thank you, Aniko, for your introduction. And so yeah, today I'm going to talk to you about possible ways in which we can achieve sustainable technological development in literary translation, or at least what came out of my PhD study about this. In particular, what motivated me to start this study in the first place was that there was always a lot of, translation technology are an integral part of non-literary translation workflows at the moment, while the same is not entirely true for literary translation, where technology is still seen with a skeptical eye in many areas. But at the same time, research in translation technology applied to literary translation has been developed in recent years, especially machine translation and post-editing related to literary translation, but also translation memories and cut tools in general, and the application to literary text. And so what I wanted to do with the study was to kind of merge the two areas. And while research in literary translation tends to focus on the literary translator as a person, as an individual, and as a professional, research in other areas of translation, I focused more on technology. And so I try to merge the two and see the relationship between literary translators' self-imaging strategies and their attitudes towards technology. So to start with, the literary translator self-image as depicted as emerging from the literature is based on a discourse of anti-professionalization, which emerges to oppose literary translation low professional status. And so when literary translators perceive their profession to be of low, to be perceived by others as having low professional status, they counteract this perception with constructing a self-image that is based in parameters and qualities that are not, for example, a degree or a specific certificate that you have to obtain to become a literary translator. Is something more related to vocation and to personal backgrounds and experiences that are all channeled in the profession in being a literary translator. In particular, what Sela-Sheffy finds in her research is that they tend to construct three main idealized personae, and these are those of custodian of language, of cultural ambassador and innovator, and that of artist. And so literary translators are kind of gatekeepers of entire, or at least perceive themselves and describe themselves as gatekeepers of entire cultural and linguistic systems. And at the same time, there are innovators of the system because they decide what gets to be translated in that literary, in that cultural and linguistic context. And at the same time, they are artists in their own right, meaning that the difference between writing and rewriting is always blurred in a way. And so most literary translators see themselves as being writers in their own right, as being artists and creatives, even though they don't write the text from scratch, but they have to rewrite it in another language. And so there's always this dimension of creativity as being prominent in who translators are as people and as professionals. And what Heino finds in her research in recent work is that they tend to prioritize social and cultural capital instead of economic capital. And what this means is that they usually tend to dismiss pay or money and associate their profession more with passion and creativity as something that they do because they love it rather than because they earn money or because their livelihood is based on literary translation as a profession in that sense. And again, the emphasis as emerging from the literature is always on personal qualities and natural inclinations, and what Voinova and Schlesinger term a strange outsiderness. And so this need to always distance themselves from the outside world or from people that are other stakeholders in translation, in literary translation. But at the same time, what Tarkowski-Schilo notices is that computer-aided translation and interactive machine translation will probably increase in literary translation in the coming years. And so this is something that we have to kind of deal with, regardless of how literary translators perceive their self-image. And those literary translators who are comfortable with translation tools will adapt more easily to the situation. Literary translators might even benefit from the change, provided that all players in the field incorporate sustainable development as part of their view on translation quality. But what is this sustainable development like? What does it look like? And at the same time, what is the place of the figure of the literary translator, this self-image that they construct in this new socio-technological paradigm that is emerging in recent years? And so what I wanted to do with my study was to explore the relationship between self-image and attitudes towards technology. The overall research question that kind of underpinned the whole study was, what is the dynamic between humans and technology in literary translation? And what I did was develop a questionnaire that was sent out to 13 UK translation associations and 68 online communities. The questionnaire was made up of 31 open and closed questions, and it reached 150 respondents in total. So just to give you an idea of who responded to the questionnaire, my respondents were mainly between 36 and 45 years old and 46 and 55 years old. We only had 6 respondents who were in the youngest age group, 18 to 25. The great majority of them, 75% worked in Europe, 24% were based in the UK, which kind of made sense with the selection criteria, because of course part of the target group was UK translation associations, and almost half have English as the first language. In terms of academic background, 63% have an academic qualification in translation. Almost half, 49%, at postgraduate level. This is mainly MA level. And between 20 and 25% have received translation technology training. This is either as part of their postgraduate degree, so academic training in translation technology, or as professional development that they undertook outside of a degree. 87% work as freelancers, 83% define themselves as professional literary translators. This is because the questionnaire gave them the choice to define their own professional status. So if they were professional literary translators, trainees, volunteers, and so 83% said they were professional literary translators, and 58% were part-time. Now, one of the open questions that I had was for them to describe what literary translation meant to them, give a definition of literary translation as they see it, and so to kind of see what their self-image was in that sense. And so what emerges from the answers to this question is that being a literary translator, as we've seen before from Sela-Sheffy and the other studies that I mentioned, is strictly related to practitioners' personal qualities and skills, their talent and passion, and is the sum of personal experiences and backgrounds. So there's very little professionalization discourse in the more in the sense, for example, in terms of degrees and certifications and more standardized ways of determining if someone is a professional or not. And so each translator is unique and irreplaceable, but this being said, it was as if, so each answer was different. So each one of the respondents highlighted a different aspect of being a literary translator, but together they were all like different pieces of the same puzzle. They offered a coherent picture of what being a literary translator means, which is that often the professional and the personal merge together, and the line between the two is constantly blurred. And so who translators are as professionals cannot be separated from who they are as individuals. And the description that they offer are rich in emotive language. I have some examples here. Of course, there were 150 respondents. This is just a very small sample, just to give you an idea. So one respondent, for example, says, to be a literary translator, you have to be a bit of a loner, or being able to self-motivate, being disciplined, or literary translation is a free, creative, and unique profession for talented people. So this very, not vague, but subjective kind of thing. What is talent? What is uniqueness? You know, who determines that? And so it's really hard to kind of put them in a box and say this is what a literary translator is. Nothing can help the absence of inborn and acquired feeling for the subtleties of a given literary text. You do it for the prestige and the love of it. Again, the avoiding the economic dimension of the profession. And again, you don't have to make a living off of it to be one. There is little difference between a professional and a talented amateur. And then after asking them about their own perception of their own profession, I asked them to give me their opinion, their perception of how outsiders perceive the profession and what they think of literary translation. And of course, the narratives that emerged here are completely opposite to what they offered when describing their own perceptions. And so outsiders fail to grasp the very essence of literary translation. However, this misunderstanding appears necessary for them to maintain their self-image, meaning that the reason why they're able to construct their persona is because other people don't see them like that. So they can take refuge in a way in this anti-professionalization discourse that we've been talking about. Some of the answers that I got for this question were, outsiders think it's a simple word substitution. So there's no talent, no uniqueness, no creativity involved. It's just you have a word in a language and you have another one and you just substitute it. Most readers do not understand the importance of literary translation, especially if they are monolingual. Or they think that translation is more like data entry than a creative pursuit. And so this idea that outsiders see literary translation as something mechanical, as something, you know, that can be automated. And this was, you know, related to the self-image part of the questionnaire. And then I asked them some questions about technology. In particular, their attitudes towards technology appeared to be quite positive, which might be, at least surprised me at first when I read the results of my questionnaire. And so 49% said that they had positive attitudes, that they felt okay about technology in relation to literary translation. And 13% had negative attitudes, while 20% expect mixed attitudes. So I'm not sure about this, but I like this. And they will see later what they found appealing and unappealing about technology. So it would seem that literary translators are not averse to technology as such. And also something else that emerged from the questionnaire that I don't have time today to delve deeper into, but I can just generally tell you that technology training had an impact on attitudes as well as confidence with technology. So the more someone was confident with technology in the first place, the more positive attitudes they had. And age also had an impact. So the youngest respondents, generally those under 45, but mostly those 18 to 25 had exclusively positive attitudes towards technology. And training, as I said before, so having received training resulted in more positive attitudes as well. This is not a new concept. So Koskinen and Ruokonen in their study in 2017 highlighted how translators are not averse to technology as such, as I was saying, but rather to the poor usability of the tools, so poor interfaces or cluttered interfaces that disrupt the translation process, and negative effects on efficiency and productivity. So could the same be true for literary translators? And what emerged from my study was that I asked them about what they found appealing about technology, both general and translation specific, and what they found unappealing. Among the appealing aspects, we have research, so tools that help you, I don't know, online dictionaries, online encyclopedias, just the Google, the search function on Google, for example, was mentioned a lot. Efficiency, something like time tracking applications that help them track their translation times, and also what to charge to customers, for example, to clients, sorry. And things that assist the human and generally help with accuracy and consistency. So for example, spell checkers were mentioned. So tools that are mainly generic, not built specifically for translation, but just something that they can use to assist them in their translation practice. And here are some others, just again to give you an idea of the the spectrum of perceptions that emerged of narratives. So I found technology appealing, anything that allows fast information retrieval and fast working and reworking of texts, and anything that facilitates the breadth and depth of research needed for a good literary translation to be done from home. Technology that assists with the housekeeping aspect, that takes out the donkey work to focus on the creative part of the work. And so that takes care of these mechanical aspects that we mentioned before for the outsider, what outsiders perceive as being mechanical, in reality is what literary translators perceive as the most human part of literary translation. And translation memory was mentioned as well, which can remind the translator of previous renderings, perhaps also the need to avoid them, and provides a searchable record of one's decision-making process. So this goes kind of against the common conception that translation memory is only for repetitive texts and kind of dampens your creativity when translating, because it's always, recycles in a way, old translation. They say it can remind you not to translate it that way because you already did it. And again, I will welcome technology that enabled me to make better quality choices more effectively, quality being judged in my subjective experience of freedom and self-expression. So this, again, they would accept technology, they're not against technology there, but they would like technology that kind of, that is in line with their idea, with their anti-professionalization discourse. So something that works for them as people and as individuals and as human beings, rather than as literary translators, as professionals in the wider sense of the word. As far as unappealing aspects are concerned, the majority of respondents, most of respondents said they don't like technology that is a hindrance to the human, that disrupts the translation process. But also interesting to notice that 20% said that they didn't find anything to be unappealing about technology. And then we have here things like other narratives, other people's narratives. So when people say that technology will definitely replace humans, things like that were mentioned. So they were like, it's not the technology, it's the way people talk about it or push it on literary translators and other people and say that this is going to happen. Well, we know well that it's not going to happen because they need us. And things that kind of aid the proliferation of errors and inaccuracies and inconsistencies. So the opposite of what we've seen before. Some of the quotes, again, are that technology is unappealing when it tries to bypass the human understanding of language and its nuances in order to save costs. So again, this economic dimension comes up that is dismissed by literary translators constantly in favor of social and cultural capital, of personal qualities and passion and nuance and talent and uniqueness. Attempts to push the boundaries of technology within an essentially contemplative profession, which requires an unfashionable degree of isolation and respect for experience. Or again, I don't want a machine singing my part of the duet for me. And I doubt we'd agree on a voice. So this kind of the machine translation technology in this case is seen as kind of wanting to steal the essence of literary translation from them, the most human and essential part of literary translation, what they deem to be literary translation. And so putting together these two elements, the self-image and their attitudes towards technology, what emerges is that technology viewed as enhancing in general also sustains and reinforces their self-image. So they tend to have more positive attitudes and to welcome and to use tools that are in line with their vision of literary translation. So basically, I do the creative work, I do the human part of it, and the tools are okay as long as they take care of the mechanical aspects of it, and they don't interfere with the translation process. And so this type of technology bridges the gap between practitioners and the outside world, so that that different distinction that we've seen before when outsiders' narratives were perceived to be in direct opposition to their own narratives. And again, technology viewed as hindering instead widens the gap between how literary translators perceive themselves and the outside world. So they're kind of forced to retire once again in their own vision of the profession, because other people don't understand and they keep pushing this narrative that translation is mechanical, that it doesn't take too much effort or creativity, and so technology can do it. And so what's the point of having translators? And so this kind of misunderstanding between their poetic idea of literary translation and literary translation being an essential part of who they are as people, and this completely opposite narrative of the outsiders saying that it's not that big of a deal. And so the main point here is that the distinction should probably not be between general technology or generic technology and translation specific technology, but rather on developing either translation technology as well, but that can work with literary translators, bearing in mind their own unique perspective on the profession. And so what's next? So for at least from my own findings from this study, what emerges that what's needed next is the involvement of translators, of course, in the tools development process, because at the moment they feel kind of excluded from the narrative and from the technological development in general. And then again, the technology training and knowledge of tools that are available to them is essential for them to have positive attitudes and be more open to the possibilities that technology can also open for them. So the enhancing possibilities that technology has in certain cases. And active inclusion of literary translators self-imaging strategies in, for example, here translation process research, but in general, research on new tools, new workflows should always include or take into account at least this unique perspective that literary translators have on their own profession and the way they see it. And so again, here just a few examples and suggestions. So maybe research into alternatives to machine translation centric workflows. So,
sorry, Paola. Yeah. Could you finish it? Just
it's the last slide. Yes, yeah, I'm done. Sorry. Yeah. So research into alternatives to machine translation centric workflows. So we've seen that with Udall and Ruffo. So for example, using translation memories or text analysis tools. Again, developing technology training aimed specifically at literary translators and how this technology can help them with their specific challenges of creative texts, and incorporating practitioner self-image in research, and focusing on enhancing tools rather than general and translation specific ones. And that's me. Thank you. And sorry for running over time.
Thank you very much. You have lots of questions and we have little time. So just try to understand the first, because that's perhaps the most important, that how are you or your respondents define professionalism? So
again, is this nobody knows basically. So what they're saying is, it's not something that you get with a degree. The degree can help, but there's no standardized parameters. So you can't say to become a literary translator, you need to do step 1, step 2, step 3. It's something that they were either born into, or that, they described as being a vocation, or something that they were naturally inclined to do, or like their family traveled a lot when they were younger. And so they got this attitudes toward literary text. So it's something that is deeply related to who they are as people and the experiences that they developed during their lives.
That's clear, but compared to the literary translator self-image, what you consider to be professionalism?
Oh, me personally?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I don't know if I can decide that. No, I think you need both, as in, of course, theoretical and academic preparation is important. But at the same time, what they were saying, the difference between a professional trained literary translator and a talented amateur might be none. So if you're really talented, you love literature and you know languages, and you have this passion, and you might be a really good literary translator. So it's not a degree that determines that. But of course, in the context of PETRA-E as well, it would be really interesting also to hear from the other panel about training and what, how to standardize kind of the profession, because in the end you do need some standards. And so, yeah, I don't have a personal answer to that yet, but we'll see.
Just one more question. And please answer the others in the chat. Yeah.
Okay.
So do you agree that the notion of doing it for the love of it, and emphasis on social culture over economic capital, is a privileged position which could undermine calls for improved rates or royalties and so on?
I can't find the answer. Could improve rates, as in.
Yeah, because if the publisher knows that you are doing it for the love of literary translation, then of course they do not have to offer you improved rates.
that's part of the not problem, but issue with pay, because of course they keep saying, I don't care about the money, I do it because I like it. So they might even pay me nothing, but they also complained about the money, saying, you know, because it's such a you need to be skilled to be a literary translator, we should be paid more, but we don't care. And so there's this thing that they cannot admit that they want money, because that would kind of take away from their let's say poetic description of the profession. And so there's this kind of struggle between the economic dimension, but it can be both ways. So like saying that you do it for the love of it, but at the same time underlining the fact, highlighting the fact that to be a literary translator, you need all of these competencies anyways. You need to be well versed in languages and literature, and you need to have had amazing experiences in your life and have traveled a lot, and knowing different cultures, and you're a gatekeeper of cultural systems. That is also something that is valuable and can be sold in a way as valuable work that needs to be adequately rewarded.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, we do not have time for all the other questions. So please read them carefully and answer them. And thank you very, very much for this interesting talk.